Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good evening to Dr. Jerome. My name is Aziz Analisa binti Azmi, and me and my group members will be representing our research study, which is the relationship between import producer price index and also consumer price index in Malaysia. First, I will be explaining about the chapter 1 of our study, which is Introduction. Generally, import means the act of bringing goods or services from abroad for domestic use or consumption. Import happens due to the excess demand of an economy. Imports are important for the growth of economy of a country because not all countries have the resources and skills required to produce certain goods and services. In this study, we are going to explain the relationship between producer price index (PPI), import, and consumer price index in Malaysia. According to Ahmad et al. 2018, in an economy, when demand surpasses the local production level, then the disparity grows, which leads to the inflationary situation. Another study by Khan et al. 2018 found that there is a positive relationship between producer price index (PPI) and consumer price index (CPI). Long-run and dynamic relationships are found between inflation and import. So, what are the problems that inspire us to do this research study? The first one is to understand the relationship between import and CPI, which can help to formulate effective policies, manage inflation, maintaining price stability, and also making important economic decisions. This will benefit policymakers and governments to make decisions for our economy. The second one is only a small number of studies can be found discussing about the relationship between PPI and CPI, especially in Malaysia. So we found out that there are a small number of studies that can explain the relationship between these two variables, and therefore we want to do this study so that we can contribute to that number of study by contributing our research result. And the last one is this study can be used by policymakers to understand the relationship between two indices, which is PPI and also CPI, to gain insights about the inflation at different states of economy in our country. So what are the justifications for our study? We have two justifications. The first one is not many studies can be found studying the relationship between PPI and CPI in Malaysia. Just like I mentioned before, there are only a small number of studies that are performed in Malaysia involving these two variables, which is PPI and CPI. Therefore, we feel like it is our responsibility to make this study to contribute to that small number of research in Malaysia. And the last one is results from previous studies are inconclusive. The objective of our study is, first one is to find the relationship between import and CPI in Malaysia, and the second one is to examine the relationship between CPI and PPI in Malaysia. Some of the research questions that we have for our study is, the first one, does import influence the CPI in Malaysia? Does PPI and CPI related to each other? And also, how does import influence CPI in Malaysia? However, there are some limitations for our study, and the first one is our study is only focused on Malaysia. Of course, we only took data from Malaysia, and findings may not be applicable to other countries since we only do the research on Malaysia, and different countries have different data. And the second one is limited variables. Other factors influencing CPI might be overlooked because we only took into account import and also PPI.
So, I will present about the literature review for these studies. The first is about the relationship between producer price index and consumer price index. According to Han 2018, examined the relationship between PPI and CPI in Czech Republic. The authors employ various economic techniques and data from Czech Statistic Office to analyze the relationship between these two indices. Their findings suggest a positive relationship between PPI and CPI, indicating that changes in producer price tend to influence consumer price. Next, the article titled "Why Are There Always Inconsistent Answer to the Relation Between the PPI and CPI? Re-examination using panel data analysis." According to Yu Chin Peng, in 2016 aims to investigate the reason behind the inconsistent finding regarding to the relationship between the producer price index and consumer price index. Next, the article titled "Causality Between Consumer Price and Producer Price, Evident from Mexico," investigates the causal relationship between consumer price and producer price in the context of Mexico. The study aims to provide empirical evidence on the direction and strength to causality between these two important price indices. The article titled "Do Producer Price Cause Consumer Price? Some Empirical Evidence" by Muhammad Fahmi Ghazali aim to investigate the relationship between producer price and consumer price. The study provides empirical evidence to shed light on whether change in producer price have a significant impact on a change in consumer price. In this slide, I will present about the relationship between imports and consumer price index. The article titled "Economic Analysis of Import and Inflation Relationship in Turkey between 1995 and 2010. According to Albert, 2005, said that the relation between import volume and inflation rate has been discussed several times for different countries. This study investigates the relationship between inflation and import volume by using monthly time series data for the Turkish economy over the period from 1995 to 2010. The next article about relationship between import and consumer price index is "Export, Import and Inflation, a study on Bangladesh" by Dewan Muqtadir Al-Mukid and AZM Shayullah, aims to investigate the relationship between export, import and the inflation in the context of Bangladesh economy. This literature review provides an overview and critical analysis of the existing literature on the subject, highlight the key findings and theoretical frameworks employed in previous studies.
I will explain our research methodology. Our research methodology consists three parts: descriptive analysis, ordinary least squares method or LS regression, diagnostic test, which consists heteroscedasticity test, Granger causal analysis, Ramsey reset, multicollinearity test, autocorrelation test, normality test, and Kusum test. For descriptive analysis, the highest mean is CPI with 90.80645, while the lowest is PPI with 74.30645. For standard deviation, the highest is PPI and the lowest is CPI. Skewness, there are two positive skewness, which are M and PPI, while CPI is negative. For kurtosis, it's a normal univariate distribution, while Jacobera normally distributed. Ordinary least squares OLS regression. So we provide equation which are CPIT equals to beta 0 plus beta 1 MT plus beta 2 PPIT plus error term. So CPI is consumer price index, beta is intercept coefficient, M is import, PPI is producer price index, and ET is error term. For ordinary least squares or LS regression, import rejected hypothesis because it's less than 0.05, which is 0.02 at 1, so has significant impact on CPI. While PPI do not reject hypothesis. Heteroscedasticity test. As we know, probe chi-square value less than 0.05, the data has heteroscedasticity, while if the probe chi-square value more than 0.05, the data has homoscedasticity. So in our data, our probe chi-square value is equal to 0.0548, which are greater than the critical value 0.05. So, to conclude, our data has homoscedasticity. Granger causality analysis. So here we have 6 null hypotheses, which are DM does not Granger causes DCPI, DCPI does not Granger cause DM, DPPI does not Granger cause DCPI, DCPI does not Granger cause DPPI, DPPI does not Granger cause DM, and DM does not Granger cause DPPI. Among these 6 null hypotheses, only one rejected null hypothesis, which is difference consumer price index does not Granger cause difference producer price index, because it have 0.0092 probability value, which less than 0.05. For Ramsey reset, as we can see here, T statistic, F statistic, and likelihood ratio have the significant probability because all data have less than 0.005. So, all are rejected hypothesis.
I will continue the next diagnostic test, which is autocorrelation test. The value of the Watson statistic in of-range statistics is 0.26. If the Watson is equal to 2, it shows there is no autocorrelation. If the Watson is less than 2, it means positive autocorrelation. And if the Watson is greater than 2, it shows negative autocorrelation. Here we can see that the value of the Watson is 0.268, which is less than 2. This means there is positive autocorrelation. But for the severity of autocorrelation, we can apply the serial correlation LM test. The hypothesis of serial correlation LM test is no autocorrelation. If p-value is greater than 0.05, it means we can accept HO, which shows no autocorrelation. If p-value is less than 0.05, it means we can reject HO, which autocorrelation in regression model. As we can see, the p-value more than 0.05, so we accept HO autocorrelations. Multicollinearity test. In this case, according to this sentence IVF values, all the variables have greater than 10 value. As we already know that consumer price index should be less than equal to 10. If the value is greater than 10 or 10, this means there is several multicollinearity exists in the model and we have to fit it. But in this case, the value of greater than 10, it means there is several multicollinearity in this model. Normally test. The probability of Jaguar Merah is less than 0.05 or 5%, then we will reject the null hypothesis and accept alternative hypothesis, while if the probability value is greater than 0.05 or 5%, then we accept the null hypothesis, which is residual are normally distributed. So in this case, as you can see, that the probability value is 0.20, which means 20%, which is greater than 5%. So we will accept the null hypothesis, which is residual normally distributed. Kusum test, which measures the cumulative deviation from the expected value over time. The cumulative sum plots when place should be within the 5% critical lines, which prove that residual variance is stable. If the cumulative sum plus goes outside the area of the two critical lines, the model exhibits instability. As you can see, the cumulative entire line at a 5% significant level. So we do not reject HO for the Gaussian test. Gaussian square test. Calculate the cumulative sum of the squared differences between the observed and expected values. The cumulative line is located outside the area of the critical line at a 5% significant level for the Gaussian of square test. So we reject it for the Gaussian of square test. It suggests a significant departure from the null hypothesis and indicates the presence of a structural change.
Therefore, we can conclude that import has a relationship with consumer price index. We can also conclude that PPI has no relationship with CPI. For Granger causality analysis, we found out that the result of Granger causality analysis is there is one-way causality between CPI and PPI. The direction of causality is from CPI to PPI. The other two null hypothesis shows that there is no significant causality detected.